an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Blood of Elves, a novel of The Witcher, by Andrzej Sapkowski, brought to you by Melanie. In this episode, I will live read the first half of Chapter 1. There will be a second episode in which I live read the second half. Melanie felt that it was too long a chapter to live read straight through without commenting, so I will do half, comment, and then another half, and comment. And Melanie has a spot that she knows where she wants me to stop. I should have looked that up. But Melanie, when I reach the place where you want me to stop, just post in the comments there. And then I will give you my thoughts on what I have read so far. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. So, yeah, this episode is the first live read that I have done since the first episode I ever did, I think, which was Parable of the Sower. So I'm very interested to see how this goes. And I feel like I'm going to look here and just double check. Because I have the events here. Start with page 2, Verily I Say Unto You, and stop part 1 of page 25. Mama Lenteri saying something about the blank, blank, blank. Okay, so that's going to be how I handle this one. So I just wanted to double check that and make sure that I had this. All right, so she wants me to start with the Verily I Say Unto You. Here we go. And there are going to be some things that I don't know how to pronounce. Verily I say unto you, the era of the sword and axe is nigh, the era of the wolf's blizzard. The time of the white chill and the white light is nigh, the time of madness and the time of contempt. Ted Dirath, the time of end. The world will die amidst frost and be reborn with the new sun. It will be reborn of the elder blood, of Hin Iker, of the seed that has been sown, a seed which will not sprout, but will burst into flame. Estuaes, thus shall it be. Watch for the signs. What signs these shall be, I say unto you. First the earth will flow with the blood of Einshi, the blood of elves. Ein Ithnespith, Ithlin Eichli, Eip, Eisvein's prophecy. Don't know that I said that right, but I did my best. I'm sorry. Melanie's asking if I shared the event to the patrons group. You know what? I don't think I did. I just shared it to the main page. But, I'm sorry about that. I totally forgot because I was wrapped up in prepping for a live read. Okay. Chapter 1. The town was in flames. The narrow streets leading to the moat and the first terrace belched smoke and embers, flames devouring the densely clustered thatch houses and licking at the castle walls. From the west, from the harbor gate, the screams and clamor of vicious battle and the dull blows of a battering ram smashing against the walls grew ever louder. Their attackers had surrounded them unexpectedly, shattering the barricades which had been held by no more than a few soldiers, a handful of townsmen carrying halberds and some crossbowmen from the guild. Their horses, decked out in flowing black caparisons, flew over the barricades like specters, their rides bright, glistening blades sowing death among the fleeing defenders. Ciri felt the knight who carried her before him on his saddle abruptly spur his horse. She heard his cry. "Hold on!" he shouted. "Hold on!" Other knights wearing the colors of Sintra overtook them, sparring, even in full flight, with the Nilf Guardians. Whew. Ciri caught a glimpse of the skirmish from a corner of her eye, the crazed swirl of blue, gold, and black cloaks amidst the clash of steel, the clatter of blades against shields, the neighing of horses. Shouts. No, not shouts. Screams. "Hold on!" Fear. With every jolt, every jerk, every leap of the horse, pain shot through her hands as she clutched at the reins. Her legs contracted painfully, unable to find support. Her eyes watered from the smoke. The arm around her suffocated her, choking her, the force compressing her ribs. All around her, screaming such as she had never before heard, grew louder. What must one do to a man to make him scream so? Fear. Overpowering, paralyzing, choking fear. Again the clash of iron, the grunts and snorts of the horses. The houses whirled around her, and suddenly she could see windows belching fire where a moment before there'd been nothing but a muddy little street, spewed with corpses and cluttered with the abandoned possessions of the fleeing population. All at once, the knight at her back was racked by a strange wheezing cough. Blood spurted over the hands of the grasping reins, and more screams. Arrows whistled past. A fall, a shock, painful bruising against armor. Hooves pounded past her, a horse's belly and a frayed girth flashing by above her head. Then another horse's belly and a flowing black caparison. Grunts of exertion like a lumberjack's when chopping wood. But this isn't wood. It's iron against iron. A shout, muffled and dull, and something huge and black collapsed into the mud next to her with a splash, spurting blood. An armored foot quivered, thrashed, goring the earth with an enormous spur. A jerk. Some force plucked her up, pulled her onto another saddle. Hold on. Again the bone-shaking speed, the mad gallop, arms and legs desperately searching for support. The horse rears. Hold on. There is no support. There is blood. The horse falls. It's impossible to jump aside. No way to break free, to escape the tight embrace of these chainmail-clad arms. There is no way to avoid the blood pouring onto her head and over her shoulders. A jolt, the squelch of mud, a violent collision with the ground, horrifically still after the furious ride. The horse's harrowing wheezes and squeals as it tries to regain its feet. The pounding of horseshoes, fetlocks, and hooves flashing past, black caparisons and cloaks, shouting. The street is on fire, a roaring red wall of flame. Silhouetted before it, a rider towers over the flaming roofs, enormous. His black caparisoned horse prances, tosses its head, neighs. The rider stares down at her. Ciri sees his eyes gleaming through the slit in his huge helmet, framed by a bird of prey's wings. She sees the fire reflected in the broad blade of the sword he held in his lowered hand. The rider looks at her. Ciri is unable to move. The dead man's motionless arms, wrapped around her waist, hold her down. She is locked in place by something heavy and wet with blood, something which is lying across her thigh, pinning her to the ground. And she is frozen in fear, a terrible fear which turns her entrails inside out, which deafens Ciri to the screams of the wounded horse, the roar of the blaze, the cries of dying people, and the pounding drums. The only thing which exists, which counts, which still has any meaning, is fear. Fear embodied in the figure of a black knight wearing a helmet decorated with feathers frozen against the wall of raging red flames. The rider spurs his horse, the wings on his helmet fluttering as the bird of prey takes to flight, launching itself to attack its helpless victim paralyzed with fear. The bird, or maybe the knight, screeches terrifyingly, cruelly, triumphantly. A black horse, black armor, black flowing cloak, and behind this, flames. A sea of flames. Fear. The bird shrieks, the wings beat, feathers slap against her face. Fear! Help! Why doesn't anyone help me? Alone, weak, helpless, I can't move. I can't force a sound from my constricted throat. Why does no one come to help me? I'm terrified. Eyes blaze through the slit in the huge winged helmet. The black cloak veils everything. Ciri! She woke, numb and drenched in sweat, with her scream, the scream which had woken her, still hanging in the air, still vibrating somewhere within her, beneath a breastbone and burning against her parched throat. Her hands ached, clenched around the blanket. Her back ached. Ciri, calm down. The night was dark and windy, the crowns of the surrounding pine trees rustling steadily and melodiously, their limbs and trunks creaking in the wind. There was no malevolent fire, no screams, only this gentle lullaby. Beside her the campfire flickered with light and warmth, its reflected flames glowing from harness buckles, gleaming red in the leather-wrapped and iron-banded hilt of a sword leaning against a saddle on the ground. There was no other fire and no other iron. The hand against her cheek smelled of leather and ashes, not of blood. Geralt. It was just a dream, a bad dream. Ciri shuddered violently, curling her arms and legs up tight. A dream. Just a dream. The campfire had already died down. The birch logs were red and luminous, occasionally crackling, giving off tiny spurts of blue flame, which illuminated the white hair and sharp profile of the man wrapping a blanket and sheepskin around her. Geralt, I'm right here. Sleep, Ciri. You have to rest. We've a long way ahead of us still. I can hear music, she thought suddenly. Amidst the rustling of the trees, there's music. Lute music and voices. The princess of Cintra, a child of destiny, a child of elder blood, the blood of elves. Geralt of Rivia, the white wolf, and his destiny. No, that's legend, a poet's invention. The princess is dead. She was killed in the town streets while trying to escape. Hold on. Hold. Geralt. What is it, Ciri? What did he do to me? What happened? What did he do to me? Who? The knight, the black knight with feathers on his helmet. I can't remember anything. He shouted and looked at me. I can't remember what happened, only that I was frightened. I was so frightened. The man leaned over her, the flame of the campfire sparkling in his eyes. They were strange eyes, very strange. Ciri had been frightened of them. She hadn't liked meeting his gaze, but that had been a long time ago. A very long time ago. I can't remember anything, she whispered, searching for his hand, as tough and coarse as raw wood. The Black Knight. It was a dream. Sleep peacefully. It won't come back. Ciri had heard such reassurances in the past. They had been repeated to her endlessly. Many, many times she had been offered comforting words when her screams had woken her during the night. But this time it was different. Now she believed it, because it was Geralt of Rivia, the White Wolf, the Witcher, who said it. The man who was her destiny, the one for whom she was destined. Geralt the Witcher, who had found her surrounded by war, death, and despair, who had taken her with him and promised they would never part. She fell asleep, holding tight to his hand. Time for a sip of tea. The bard finished the song. Tilting his head a little, he repeated the ballad's refrain on his lute, delicately, softly, a single tone higher than the apprentice accompanying him. No one said a word. Nothing but the subsiding music and the whispering leaves and squeaking boughs of the enormous oak could be heard. Then all of a sudden, a goat tethered to one of the carts which circled the ancient trees bleated lengthily. At that moment, as if given a signal, one of the men seated in the large semicircular audience stood up. Throwing his cobalt-blue cloak with gold braid trim back over his shoulder, he gave a stiff, dignified bow. "Thank you. Master Dandelion," he said, his voice resonant without being loud. "Allow me, Radcliffe of Oxenford, Master of the Arcana, to express what I am sure is the opinion of everyone here present, and utter words of gratitude and appreciation for your fine art and skill." The wizard ran his gaze over those assembled, an audience of well over 100 people seated on the ground, on carts, or standing in a tight semicircle facing the foot of the oak. They nodded and whispered amongst themselves. Several people began to applaud, while others greeted the singer with upraised hands. Women, touched by the music, sniffed and wiped their eyes on whatever came to hand, which differed according to their standing, profession, and wealth. Peasant women used their forearms at the backs of their hands. Merchants' wives dabbed their eyes with linen handkerchiefs, while elves and noblewomen used kerchiefs of the finest tight-woven cotton, and Baron Villebert's 3 daughters, who had, along with the rest of his retinue, halted their falcon hunt to attend the famous troubadour's performance, blew their noses loudly and sonorously into elegant mold-green cashmere scarves. "It would not be an exaggeration to say," continued the wizard, "that you have moved us deeply, Master Dandelion. You have prompted us to reflection and thought. You have stirred our hearts. Allow me to express our gratitude and our respect." The troubadour stood and took a bow, sweeping the heron feather pinned to his fashionable hat across his knees. His apprentice broke off his playing, grinned and bowed too, until Dandelion glared at him sternly and snapped something under his breath. The boy lowered his head and returned to softly strumming his lute strings. The assembly stirred to life. The merchants traveling in the caravan whispered amongst themselves and then rolled a sizable cask of beer out to the foot of the oak tree. Wizard Radcliffe lost himself in quiet conversation with Baron Villebert. Having blown their noses, the Baron's daughters gazed at Dandelion in adoration, which went entirely unnoticed by the bard, engrossed as he was in smiling, winking, and flashing his teeth at a haughty, silent group of roving elves, and at one of them in particular, a dark-haired, large-eyed beauty sporting a tiny ermine cap. Dandelion had rivals for her attention. The elf with her huge eyes and beautiful toque hat had caught his audience's interest as well, and a number of knights, students, and galliards were paying court to her with their eyes. The elf clearly enjoyed the attention, picking at the lace cuffs on her chemise and fluttering her eyelashes, but the group of elves with her surrounded her on all sides, not bothering to hide their antipathy toward her admirers. The glade beneath Bleobaris, the great oak, was a place of frequent rallies, a well-known travelers' resting place and meeting ground for wanderers, and was famous for its tolerance and openness. The Druids protecting the ancient tree called it the seat of friendship and willingly welcomed all comers. But even during an event as exceptional as the world-famous troubadour's just concluded performance, the travelers kept to themselves, remaining in clearly delineated groups. Elves stayed with elves. Dwarfish craftsmen gathered with their kin, who were often hired to protect the merchant caravans and were armed to the teeth. Their groups tolerated at best the gnome miners and halfling farmers who camped beside them. All non-humans were uniformly distant toward humans. The humans repaid in kind, but were not seen to mix amongst themselves either. Nobility looked down on the merchants, and traveling salesmen with open scorn, while soldiers and mercenaries distanced themselves from shepherds and their reeking sheepskins. The few wizards and their disciples kept themselves entirely apart from the others, and bestowed their arrogance on everyone in equal parts. A tight-knit, dark and silent group of peasants lurked in the background, resembling a forest with their rakes, pitchforks, and flails poking above their heads. They were ignored by all and sundry. The exception, as ever, was the children. Freed from the constraints of silence which had been enforced during the bard's performance, the children dashed into the woods with wild cries and enthusiastically immersed themselves in a game whose rules were incomprehensible to all those who had bidden farewell to the happy years of childhood. Children of elves, dwarves, halflings, gnomes, half-elves, quarter-elves, and toddlers of mysterious provenance neither knew nor recognized racial or social divisions. At least, not yet. "Indeed," shouted one of the knights present in the glade, who was thin as a bean-pole and wearing a red and black tunic emblazoned with 3 lion passant. "The wizard speaks the truth. The ballads were beautiful. Upon my word, honourable Dandelion, if you ever pass near Baldhorn, my lord's castle, stop by without a moment's hesitation. You will be welcomed like a prince. What am I saying? Welcomed like King Vizimir himself. I swear on my sword I have heard many a minstrel, but none even came close to being your equal, master. Accept the respect and tributes of those who were born to knighthood, and those of us appointed to the position pay to your skills." Flawlessly sensing the opportune moment, the troubadour winked at his apprentice. The boy set his lute aside and picked up a little casket which served as a collection box for the audience's more measurable expressions of gratitude. He hesitated, ran his eyes over the crowd, then replaced the little casket and grabbed a large bucket standing nearby. Master Dandelion bestowed an approving smile on the young man for his prudence. "Master!" shouted a sizable woman sitting on a cart, the sides of which were painted with a sign for Vera Lowenhaupt and Sons, which was full of wickerwork. Her sons, nowhere to be seen, were no doubt busy wasting away their mother's hard-earned fortune. "Master Dandelion, what is this? Are you going to leave us in suspense? That can't be the end of your ballad. Sing to us of what happened next." "Songs and ballads," the musician bowed, "never end, dear lady, because poetry is eternal and immortal. It knows no beginning, it knows no end." "But what happened next?" The tradeswoman didn't give up, generously rattling coins into the bucket Dandelion's apprentice held out to her. "At least tell us about it, even if you have no wish to sing of it. Your song mentioned no names, but we know the witcher you sing of is no other than the famous Geralt of Rivia, and the enchantress for whom he burns with love is the equally famous Yennefer. And the child's surprise, destined for the witcher and sworn to him from birth, is Cyrilla, the unfortunate princess of Cintra, the town destroyed by the invaders. Am I right?" Dandelion smiled, remaining enigmatic and aloof. "I sing of universal matters, my dear generous lady," he stated, "of emotions which anyone can experience, not about specific people." "Oh, come on," yelled a voice from the crowd. "Everyone knows those songs are about Geralt the Witcher." "Yes, yes," squealed Baron Villebert's daughters in chorus, drying their sodden scarves. "Sing on, Master Dandelion. What happened next? Did the Witcher and Yennefer the Enchantress find each other in the end, and did they love each other? Were they happy? We want to know." "Enough!" roared the dwarf leader with a growl in his throat, shaking his mighty waist-length red beard. "It's crap. All these princesses, sorceresses, destiny, love, women's fanciful tales. If you'll pardon the expression, great poet, it's all lies, just a poetic invention to make the story prettier and more touching. But of the deeds of war, the massacre and plunder of Cintra, the battles of Marnadal and Sodden, you did sing that mightily, Dandelion. There's no regrets in parting with silver for such a song, a joy to a warrior's heart. And I, Sheldon Skaggs, declare there's not an ounce of lies in what you say. And I can tell the lies from the truth, because I was there at Sodden. I stood against the Nilfgaard invaders with an axe in my hand." "I, Donimir of Troy," shouted the thin knight with 3 lions' passant emblazoned across his tunic, "was at both battles of Sodden, but I did not see you there, Sir Dwarf." "No doubt because you were looking after the supply train," Sheldon Skaggs retorted, "while I was in the front line where things got hot." "Mind your tongue, Beardy," said Donimir of Troy, flushing, hitching up his sword belt, "and who you're speaking to." "Have a care yourself." The dwarf whacked his palm against the axe wedged in his belt, turned to his companions and grinned. "Did you see him there? Frigging knight. See his coat of arms? Ha! 3 lions on a shield. 2 shitting, and the 3rd snarling." "Peace, peace." A gray-haired druid in a white cloak averted trouble with a sharp, authoritative voice. "This is not fitting, gentlemen. Not here, under Bleobarris's crown, an oak older than all the disputes and quarrels of the world. and not in poet Dandelion's presence, from whose ballads we ought to learn of love, not contention. Quite so. A short, fat priest with a face glistening with sweat seconded the druid. You look but have no eyes. You listen but have deaf ears, because divine love is not in you. You are like empty barrels. Speaking of barrels, squeaked a long-nosed gnome from his cart painted with a sign for iron hardware, manufacture, and sale. Roll another out, guildsman. Poet Dandelion's throat is surely dry, and ours too from all these emotions. Verily, like empty barrels, I tell ye. The priest, determined not to be put off, drowned out the ironware gnome. You have understood nothing of Master Dandelion's ballad. You have learned nothing. You do not see that these ballads speak of man's fate, that we are no more than toys in the hands of the gods, our lands no more than their playground. The ballads about destiny portrayed the destinies of us all, and the legend of Geralt the Witcher and Princess Cyrilla, although it is set against the true background of that war, is after all a mere metaphor, the creation of a poet's imagination designed to help us. You're talking rubbish, holy man, hollered Vera Lowenhaupt from the heights of her cart. What legend? What imaginative creation? You may not know him, but I know Geralt of Rivia. I saw him with my own eyes in Wizima when he broke the spell on King Foltest's daughter. And I met him again later on the Merchant's Trail, where, at Gildea's request, he slew a ferocious griffin which was preying on the caravans, and thus saved the lives of many good people. No, this is no legend or fairy tale. It is the truth, the sincere truth, which Master Dandelion sang for us. I second that, said a slender female warrior with her black hair smoothly brushed back and plaited into a thick braid. I, Rayla of Lyria, also know Geralt the White Wolf, the famous slayer of monsters, and I've met the enchantress Lady Yennefer on several occasions. I used to visit Aegirn and her home of Vengerberg. I don't know anything about their being in love, though. But it has to be true, the attractive elf in the ermine toque suddenly said in a melodious voice. Such a beautiful ballad of love could not be but true. It could not. Baron Villebert's daughters supported the elf, and as if on command wiped their eyes on their scarves. Not by any measure. Honorable wizard, Vera Lowenhaupt turned to Radcliffe. Were they in love or not? Surely you know what truly happened to them. Yennefer and the Witcher, disclose the secret. If the song says they were in love, replied the wizard, then that's what happened, and their love will endure down the ages. Such is the power of poetry. It is said, interrupted Baron Villebert all of a sudden, that Yennefer of Vengerberg was killed on Sodden Hill. Several enchantresses were killed there. That is not true, said Donimir of Troy. Her name is not on the monument. I am from those parts and have often climbed Sodden Hill and read the names engraved on the monument. 3 enchantresses died there. Triss Marigold, Lytta Need, known as Coral. And the name of the third has slipped my mind. The knight glanced at Wizard Radcliffe, who smiled wordlessly. And this Witcher, Sheldon Skaggs suddenly called out. This Geralt, who loved Yennefer, has also bitten the dust, apparently. I heard he was killed somewhere in Transriver. He slew and slew monsters until he met his match. That's how it goes. He who fights with the sword dies by the sword. Everyone comes across someone who will better them eventually, and is made to taste cold, hard iron. I don't believe it. The slender warrior contorted her pale lips, spat vehemently on the ground, and crossed her chainmail-clad arms with a crunch. I don't believe there is anyone to best Geralt of Rivia. I have seen this Witcher handle a sword. His speed is simply inhuman. Well said, threw in Wizard Radcliffe. Inhuman. Witchers are mutated, so their reactions... I don't understand you, magician. The warrior twisted her lips even more nastily. Your words are too learned. I know one thing. No swordsman I have ever seen can match Geralt of Rivia, the White Wolf. and so I will not accept that he was defeated in battle, as the dwarf claims. Every swordsman's an arse when the enemy's not sparse, remarked Sheldon Skaggs sententiously, as the elves say. Elves, stated a tall, fair-haired representative of the elder race coldly from his place beside the elf with the beautiful toque, are not in the habit of using such vulgar language. No, no, squealed Baron Villebert's daughters from behind their green scarves. Geralt the Witcher can't have been killed. The Witcher found Ciri, the child destined for him, and then the enchantress Yennefer, and all three lived happily ever after. Isn't that true, Master Dandelion? "'Twas a ballad, my noble young ladies," said the beer-parched gnome manufacturer of ironwares with a yawn. "Why look for truth in a ballad? Truth is one thing, poetry another. Let's take this. What was her name? Ciri? The famous child surprise? Master Dandelion trumped that up for sure. I've been to Cintra many a time, and the king and queen lived in a childless home with no daughter, no son." "Liar!" shouted a red-haired man in a sealskin jacket, a checked kerchief bound around his forehead. "Queen Calanthe, the lioness of Cintra, had a daughter called Pavetta. She died, together with her husband, in a tempest which struck out at sea, and the depths swallowed them both." "So, see for yourselves I'm not making this up." The ironware gnome called everyone to be his witness. "The princess of Cintra was called Pavetta, not Ciri." "Cirilla, known as Ciri, was the daughter of this drowned Pavetta," explained the red-haired man. "Calanthe's granddaughter. She was not the princess herself, but the daughter of the princess of Cintra. She was the child surprise destined for the Witcher, the man to whom, even before she was born, the queen had sworn to hand her granddaughter over, just as Master Dandelion has sung. But the Witcher could neither find her nor collect her, and here our poet has missed the truth." "Oh, yes, he's missed the truth indeed," butted in a sinewy young man who, judging by his clothes, was a journeyman on his travels prior to crafting his masterpiece and passing his master's exams. "The Witcher's destiny bypassed him. Cirilla was killed during the siege of Cintra. Before throwing herself from the tower, Queen Calanthe killed the princess's daughter with her own hand to prevent her from falling into the Nilfgaardian's claws alive." "It wasn't like that. Not like that at all," objected the red-haired man. "The princess's daughter was killed during the massacre while trying to escape from the town." "One way or another," shouted Ironware, "the Witcher didn't find Cirilla. The poet lied." "But lied beautifully," said the elf in the toque, snuggling up to the tall, fair-haired elf. "It's not a question of poetry, but of facts," shouted the journeyman. "I tell you, the princess's daughter died by her grandmother's hand. Anyone who's been to Cintra can confirm that." "And I say she was killed in the streets trying to escape," declared the red-haired man. "I know because although I'm not from Cintra, I served in the Earl of Skellig's troops supporting Cintra during the war. As everyone knows, Eisttershich, the king of Cintra, comes from the Skellig Isles. He was the Earl's uncle. I fought in the Earl's troops at Marnadal and Cintra, and later, after the defeat at Sodden." "Yet another veteran," Sheldon Skaggs snarled to the dwarves crowded around him. "All heroes and warriors. Hey, folks, is there at least one of you out there who didn't fight at Marnadal or Sodden?" "That dig is out of place, Skaggs," the tall elf reproached him, putting his arm around the beauty wearing the toque in a way intended to dispel any lingering doubts amongst her admirers. "Don't imagine you were the only one to fight at Sodden. I took part in the battle as well." "On whose side, I wonder?" Baron Villebert said to Radcliffe in a highly audible whisper which the elf ignored entirely. "As everyone knows," he continued, sparing neither the Baron nor the wizard so much as a glance, over 100,000 warriors stood on the field during the Second Battle of Sodden Hill, and of those at least 30,000 were maimed or killed. Master Dandelion should be thanked for immortalizing this famous terrible battle in one of his ballads. In both the lyrics and melody of his work, I heard not an exultation, but a warning. So I repeat, offer praise and everlasting renown to this poet for his ballad, which may perhaps prevent a tragedy as horrific as this cruel and unnecessary war from occurring in the future." "Indeed," said Baron Villebert, looking defiantly at the elf, "you have read some very interesting things into this ballad, honoured sir. Any unnecessary war, you say? You'd like to avoid such a tragedy in the future, would you? Are we to understand that if the Nilfgaardians were to attack us again, you would advise that we capitulate? Humbly accept the Nilfgaardian yoke?" "Life is a priceless gift and should be protected," the elf replied coldly. "Nothing justifies wide-scale slaughter and sacrifice of life, which is what the battles at Sodden were, both the battle lost and the battle won. Both of them cost the humans thousands of lives, and with them you lost unimaginable potential." "Elven prattle," snarled Sheldon Skaggs. "Dim-witted rubbish. It was the price that had to be paid to allow others to live decently in peace, instead of being chained, blinded, whipped, and forced to work in salt and sulfur mines. Those who died a heroic death, those who will now, thanks to Dandelion, live on forever in our memories, taught us to defend our own homes. Sing your ballads, Dandelion. Sing them to everyone. Your lesson won't go to waste, and it'll come in handy, you'll see. Because mark my words, Nilfgaard will attack us again. If not today, then tomorrow. They're licking their wounds now, recovering. But the day when we'll see their black cloaks and feathered helmets again is growing ever nearer." "What do they want from us?" yelled Vera Lowenhaupt. "Why are they bent on persecuting us? Why don't they leave us in peace, leave us to our lives and work? What do the Nilfgaardians want?" "They want our blood," howled Baron Villebert. "And our land," someone cried from the crowd of peasants. "And our women," chimed in Sheldon Skaggs with a ferocious glower. Several people started to laugh, as quietly and furtively as they could. Even though the idea that anyone other than another dwarf would desire one of the exceptionally unattractive dwarf women was highly amusing, it was not a safe subject for teasing or jests, especially not in the presence of the short, stocky, bearded individuals whose axes and short swords had an ugly habit of leaping from their belts and into their hands at incredible speed. And the dwarves, for some unknown reason, were entirely convinced that the rest of the world was lecherously lying in wait for their wives and daughters, and were extremely touchy about it. "This had to happen at some point," the gray-haired druid declared suddenly. "This had to happen. We forgot that we are not the only ones in this world, that the whole of creation does not revolve around us. Like stupid, fat, lazy minnows in a slimy pond, we chose not to accept the existence of pike. We allowed our world, like the pond, to become slimy, boggish, and sluggish. Look around you. There is crime and sin everywhere. Greed, the pursuit of profit, quarrels and disagreements are rife. Our traditions are disappearing. Respect for our values is fading. Instead of living according to nature, we have begun to destroy it. And what have we got for it? The air is poisoned by the stink of smelting furnaces. The rivers and brooks are tainted by slaughterhouses and tanneries. Forests are being cut down without a thought. Just look even on the living bark of sacred Beolibris. There is just above the poet's head a foul phrase carved out with a knife. And it's misspelled at that by a stupid, illiterate vandal. Why are you surprised? It had to end badly. Yes, yes, the fat priest joined in. Come to your senses, you sinners, while there is still time, because the anger and vengeance of the gods hangs over you. Remember Ilthin's oracle, the prophetic words describing the punishment of the gods reserved for a tribe poisoned by crime. The time of contempt will come, when the tree will lose its leaves, the bud will wither, the fruit will rot, the seed turn bitter, and the river valleys will run with ice instead of water. The white chill will come, and after the white light, and the world will perish beneath blizzards. Thus spoke Cirrus Ithlin, and before this comes to pass there will be visible signs. Plagues will ravish the earth. Remember, the Nilfgaard are our punishment from the gods. They are the whip with which the immortals will lash you sinners, so that you may... "Shut up, you sanctimonious old man," roared Sheldon Skaggs, stamping his heavy boots. "Your superstitious rot makes me sick. My guts are churning." "Careful, Sheldon." The tall elf cut him short with a smile. "Don't mock another's religion. It's not pleasant, polite, or safe." "I'm not mocking anything," protested the dwarf. "I don't doubt the existence of the gods, but it annoys me when someone drags them into earthly matters and tries to pull the wool over my eyes using the prophecies of some crazy elf. The Nilfgaardians are the instrument of the gods. Rubbish! Search back through your memories to the past, to the days of Desmond, Radawid, and Sambuck, to the days of Abred the Old Oak. You may not remember them, because your lives are so very short. You're like mayflies. But I remember, and I'll tell you what it was like in these lands just after you climbed from your boats on the Yaruga estuary and the Pontar Delta on the beach. 3 kingdoms sprang from the 4 ships which beached on those shores. The stronger groups absorbed the weaker and so grew, strengthening their positions. They invaded others' territories, conquered them, and their kingdoms expanded, becoming ever larger and more powerful. And now the Nilfgaardians are doing the same, because theirs is a strong and united, disciplined, and tightly knit country. And unless you close ranks in the same way, Nilfgaard will swallow you as a pike does a minnow, just as this wise druid said. "Let them just try." Donimir of Troy puffed out his lion-emblazoned chest and shook his sword in its scabbard. "We beat them hollow on Sodden Hill, and we can do it again." "You're very cocksure," snarled Sheldon Skaggs. "You've evidently forgotten, Sir Knight, that before the Battle of Sodden Hill, the Nilfgaard had advanced across your land like an iron roller, strewing the land between Marnadal and Transriver with the corpses of many a gallant fellow like yourself. And it wasn't loud-mouthed smartasses like you who snopped the Nilfgaardians, but the united strengths of Temeria, Redania, Airdrin, and Kedwin. Concord and unity, that's what stopped them." "Not just that," remarked Radcliffe in a cold, resonant voice. "Not just that, Master Skaggs." The dwarf hawked loudly, blew his nose, shuffled his feet, then bowed a little to the wizard. "No one is denying the contribution of your fellowship," he said. "Shame on he who does not acknowledge the heroism of the Brotherhood of Wizards on Sodden Hill. They stood their ground bravely and shed blood for the common cause and contributed most eminently to our victory. Dandelion did not forget them in this ballad, and nor shall we. But note that these wizards stood united and loyal on the hill and accepted the leadership of Vilgefortz of Roggeveen, just as we, the warriors of the 4 kingdoms, acknowledged the command of Vizimir of Redania. It's just a pity this solidarity and concord only lasted for the duration of the war, because with peace, here we are divided again. Vizimir and Foltest are choking each other with customs taxes and trading laws. Demavend of Aedern is bickering with Henselt over the northern marches, while the League of Hengfors and Thissanids of Cover don't give a toss. And I heard that looking for the old concord among the wizards is useless too. We are not closely knit, we have no discipline and no unity. But Nilfgaard does. Nilfgaard is ruled by Emperor Emir van Emrys, a tyrant and an autocrat who enforces obedience with whip, noose, and axe, thundered Baron Villibert. What are you proposing, Sir Dwarf? How are we supposed to close ranks? With similar tyranny? And which king, which kingdom, in your opinion, should subordinate the others? In which hands would you like to see the scepter and knout? What do I care? Replied Skaggs with a shrug. That's a human affair. Whoever you choose to be king wouldn't be a dwarf anyway. Or an elf, or even half-elf, added the tall representative of the elder race, his arms still wrapped around the toque-wearing beauty. You even consider quarter-elves inferior. That's where it stings, laughed Villibert. You're blowing the same horn as Nilfgaard, because Nilfgaard is also shouting about equality, promising you a return to the old order as soon as we've been conquered and they've scythed us off these lands. That's the sort of unity, the sort of equality you're dreaming of, the sort you're talking about and trumpeting. Nilfgaard pays you gold to do it, and it's hardly surprising you love each other so much. The Nilfgaardians being an elven race. Nonsense, the elf said coldly. You talk rubbish, Sir Knight. You're clearly blinded by racism. The Nilfgaardians are human, just like you. That's an outright lie. They're descended from the Black Shee, and everyone knows it. Elven blood flows through their veins. The blood of elves. And what flows through yours? The elf smiled derisively. We've been combining our blood for generations, for centuries, your race and mine, and so doing quite successfully. Fortunately or unfortunately, I don't know. You started persecuting mixed relationships less than a quarter of a century ago, and incidentally not very successfully. So, show me a human now who hasn't a dash of Shee-Icher, the blood of the elder race. Willibert turned visibly red. Vera Lowenhaupt also flushed. Wizard Radcliffe bowed his head and coughed. And most interestingly, the beautiful elf in the ermine toque blushed too. We are all children of Mother Earth. The gray-haired druid's voice resounded in the silence. We are children of Mother Nature, and though we do not respect our mother, though we often worry her and cause her pain, though we break her heart, she loves us all. Loves us all. Let us remember that we who are assembled here in this seat of friendship, let us not bicker over which of us was here first. Acorn was the first to be thrown up by the waves, and from Acorn sprouted the great Bleobaris, the oldest of oaks. Standing beneath its crown, amongst its primordial roots, let us not forget our own brotherly roots, the earth from which these roots grow. Let us remember the words of Poet Dandelion's song. Exactly, claimed Vera Lowenhaupt. And where is he? He's fled, ascertained Sheldon Skaggs, gazing at the empty place under the oak. Taken the money and fled without saying goodbye. Very elf-like. Dwarf-like, squealed Ironware. Human-like, corrected the tall elf, and the beauty in the toque rested her head against his shoulder. Time for another sip. Hey, minstrel, said Mamma Lantieri, striding into the room without knocking. The scent of hyacinths, sweat, beer, and smoked bacon wafting before her. You've got a guest. Enter, noble gentleman. Dandelion smoothed his hair and sat up in the enormous carved armchair. The two girls sitting on his lap quickly jumped up, covering their charms and pulling down their disordered clothes. The modesty of harlots, thought the poet, was not at all a bad title for a ballad. He got to his feet, fastened his belt, pulled on his doublet, all the while looking at the nobleman standing at the threshold. Indeed, he remarked, you know how to find me anywhere, though you are rarely picking such inopportune moments. You're lucky I had not yet decided which of these two beauties I prefer. And at your prices, Lantieri, I cannot afford them both. Mamma Lantieri smiled in sympathy and clapped her hands. Both girls, a fair-skinned, freckled islander and a dark-haired half-elf, swiftly left the room. The man at the door removed his cloak and handed it to Mamma, along with a small but well-filled money bag. Forgive me, master, he said, approaching the table and making himself comfortable. I know this is not a good time to disturb you, but you disappeared out from beneath the oak so quickly. I did not catch you on the high road as I had intended, and did not immediately come across your tracks in this little town. I'll not take much of your time, believe me. They always say that, and it's always a lie, the bard interrupted. Leave us alone, Lantieri, and see to it that we're not disturbed. I'm listening, sir. The man scrutinized him. He had dark, damp, almost tearful eyes, a pointed nose, and ugly, narrow lips. I'll come to the point without wasting your time, he declared, waiting for the door to close behind Mama. Your ballads interest me, Master. To be more specific, certain characters of which you sang interest me. I'm concerned with the true fate of your ballad's heroes. If I am not mistaken, the true destinies of real people inspired the beautiful work I heard beneath the oak tree. I have in mind little Cyrilla of Cintra, Queen Calanthe's granddaughter. Dandelion gazed at the ceiling, drumming his fingers on the table. Honored sir, he said dryly, you are interested in strange matters. You ask strange questions. Something tells me you are not the person I took you to be. And who did you take me to be, if I may ask? I'm not sure you may. It depends if you are about to convey greetings to me from any mutual friends. You should have done so initially, but somehow you have forgotten. I did not forget at all. The man reached into the breast pocket of his sepia-colored velvet tunic and pulled out a money bag, somewhat larger than the one he had handed the procuress, but just as well filled, which clinked as it touched the table. We simply have no mutual friends, Dandelion. But might this purse not suffice to mitigate the lack? And what do you intend to buy with this meager purse? The troubadour pouted. Mama Lantieri's entire brothel and all the land surrounding it? Let us say that I intend to support the arts, and an artist, in order to chat with the artist about his work. You love art so much, do you, dear sir? Is it so vital for you to talk to an artist that you press money on him before you've even introduced yourself, and in doing so break the most elementary rules of courtesy? At the beginning of our conversation, the stranger's dark eyes narrowed imperceptibly. My anonymity did not bother you. And now it is starting to. I am not ashamed of my name, said the man, a faint smile appearing on his narrow lips. I am called Rince. You do not know me, Master Dandelion, and that is no surprise. You are too famous and well known to all of your admirers. Yet everyone who admires your talents feels he knows you so well that a certain degree of familiarity is permissible. This applies to me, too. I know it is a misconception, so please graciously forgive me. I graciously forgive you. Then I can count on you agreeing to answer a few questions. No, you cannot, interrupted the poet, putting on airs. Now, if you will graciously forgive me, I am not willing to discuss the subjects of my work, its inspiration or its characters, fictitious or otherwise. To do so would deprive poetry of its poetic veneer and lead to triteness. Is that so? It certainly is. For example, if, having sung the ballad about the miller's merry wife, I were to announce it's really about Zverka, Miller Loach's wife, and I included an announcement that Zverka can most easily be betted every Thursday because on Thursdays the miller goes to market, it would no longer be poetry. It would be either rhyming couplets or foul slander. I understand, Rince said quickly. But perhaps that is a bad example. I am not, after all, interested in anyone's peccadillos or sins. You will not slander anyone by answering my questions. All I need is one small piece of information. What really happened to Cyrilla, the Queen of Cintra's granddaughter? Many people claim she was killed during the siege of the town. There are even eyewitnesses to support the claim. From your ballad, however, it would appear the child survived. I am truly interested to know if this is your imagination at work or the truth, true or false. I'm extremely pleased you're so interested. Dandelion smiled broadly. You may laugh, Master, whatever your name is, but that was precisely what I intended when I composed the ballad. I wished to excite my listeners and arouse their curiosity. True or false, repeated Rince coldly. If I were to give that away, I would destroy the impact of my work. Goodbye, my friend. You have used up all the time I can spare you. And two of my many inspirations are waiting out there, wondering which of them I will choose. Rince remained silent for a long while, making no move to leave. He stared at the poet with his unfriendly, moist eyes, and the poet felt a growing unease. A merry din came from the bawdy house's main room, punctuated from time to time by high-pitched feminine giggles. Dandelion turned his head away, pretending to show derisive haughtiness, but in fact he was judging the distance to the corner of the room and the tapestry showing a nymph sprinkling her breasts with water poured from a jug. Dandelion. Rince finally spoke, slipping his hand back into the pocket of his sepia-colored tunic. Answer my questions. Please. I have to know the answer. It's incredibly important to me. To you, too, believe me, because if you answer of your own free will, then... Then what? A hideous grimace crept over Rince's narrow lips. Then I won't have to force you to speak. Now listen, you scoundrel. Dandelion stood up and pretended to pull a threatening face. I loathe violence and force, but I'm going to call Mamma Lantieri in a minute, and she will call a certain Gruzilla who fulfills the honorable and responsible role of bouncer in this establishment. He is a true artist in his field. He'll kick your arse so hard you'll soar over the town roofs with such magnificence that the few people passing by at this hour will take you for a Pegasus. Rince made an abrupt gesture, and something glistened in his hand. Are you sure, he asked, you'll have time to call her? Dandelion had no intention of checking if he would have time, nor did he intend to wait. Before the stiletto had locked in Rince's hand, Dandelion had taken a long leap to the corner of the room, dived under the nymph tapestry, kicked open a secret door, and rushed headlong down the winding stairs, not nimbly steering himself with the aid of the well-worn banisters. Rince darted after him, but the poet was sure of himself. He knew the secret passage like the back of his hand, having used it numerous times to flee creditors, jealous husbands, and furious rivals from whom he had from time to time stolen rhymes and tunes. He knew that after the third turning he would be able to grope for a revolving door, behind which there was a ladder leading down to the cellar. He was sure that his persecutor would be unable to stop in time, would run on and step on a trapdoor through which he would fall and land in the pigsty. He was equally sure that, bruised, covered in shit, and mauled by the pigs, his persecutor would give up the chase. Dandelion was mistaken, as was usually the case when he was too confident. Something flashed a sudden blue behind his back, and the poet felt his limbs grow numb, lifeless, and stiff. He couldn't slow down for the revolving door. His legs wouldn't obey him. He yelled and rolled down the stairs, bumping against the walls of the little corridor. The trapdoor opened beneath him with a dry crack, and the troubadour tumbled down into the darkness and stench. Before thumping his head on the dirt floor and losing consciousness, he remembered Mamma Lantieri saying something about the pigsty being repaired. All right, so that's the stopping point, says Melanie. Stopped! Ooh, boy. A lot to talk about here, guys. And it's a good thing because Melanie had said, like, when she was commissioning these, normally it's an hour that you book for a regular episode. And I do an hour and a half for live reads so that I have time to talk about it. But she had said that the audiobook, the first chapter, is like a little over an hour. So she didn't think that would leave me enough time, which is why she divided it into two sections. And it seems like that was a good idea. So this is page 25, according to my Kindle. And where to begin? So we have, obviously, the beginning. Everyone is theorizing throughout all of these sections between the huge crew of people that were all listening to Dandelion singing to this guy with Dandelion in the whorehouse. Everybody is like trying to figure out whether this princess is still alive, but we know from the very beginning that she is, and that somehow the Witcher got away with her. I don't know how that works, but this is, and forgive me guys, I'm going to talk here a little bit about some things that are from the book club, because for the book club December 2018, Rashawn and I covered what's the, like, according to the timeline, the first book in the Witcher series. It wasn't written first. It's a prequel. But this is all relating to the very last story in the Witcher book. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, Melanie. But there is a scene where he is, because it's a series of short stories, and the final one is the one where the Witcher is at this dinner, and he is supposed to be keeping an eye on. He's in disguise, and apparently the mother like conscripted him to help take out a monster that is coming to claim the hand of her daughter in marriage. So she thinks because he's a Witcher and that he's a monster killer, that he will automatically fulfill his duty by killing this monster. It turns out, though, when the monster reveals himself and also reveals that her daughter was promised to him in a basically like a death pact with her father, the daughter is given a choice by her mother, who is very confident she won't take this monster as her husband. She's like, well, do you want to? Because if you do, then I'll allow it. But if not, then fuck this guy. And the daughter unexpectedly is like, yeah, I'll marry him. It's fine. And when she agrees to marry him, like, basically a fight almost breaks out, because there are all of these nobles here who are obviously expecting a chance to marry the princess themselves. And they are very, very horrified that she is about to just, go ahead and marry this nobody who is also a monster. He looks like a man from like midnight to dawn. And during the day, I guess, he looks like a porcupine, kind of. It's a weird thing. And when they threaten him, she starts to lose it, the princess, and has apparently this kind of like power that lifts things in the air. And she sort of basically has like a Jean Grey moment, basically. And the Witcher, combined with another one of the magicians, is able to calm her down before she kills everybody in the room, because she comes really close to doing that. And in exchange for him, like, basically saving her life and the lives of everyone there, she offers him anything. And he's like, how about the baby you're carrying in your belly? So this whole, like, exercise in whether she would accept this guy as her husband really turns out to be kind of a ruse, and she and him had been seeing each other on the sly, and she's already pregnant with his child. So that is this baby. And Calanthe is her mother. Calanthe is the one who assumed that the Witcher would just kill a monster, no problem. And he's really rather insulted by that. He's like, I'm not a fucking hitman. Like, I will kill monsters that are fucking with people. And this guy isn't doing anything. He's just enchanted. So that's how that book ends. And I was really like, both me and Rashawn were like, really? That's your payment, is that you're going to take her fucking kid? And the whole thing was supposed to be that there are very few Witchers left in the world. And Witchers are children raised a certain way and trained in a certain way and actually physically altered in certain ways so as to make them better fighters. So the suggestion is that he is going to get her child and turn that child into another Witcher. That's the implication there. So this book apparently, like, I don't want to say picks up where the other left off, because there's this raid happening, and that there was no sign of that. But I don't know how old this little girl is. The princess, apparently it's been like near a decade, because she's old enough to like, I didn't get the sense that she was still a child. But I could be wrong about that. I got the sense she was, well, you know, by child, I mean like young enough to not really understand what is happening to her. But I get the sense that she's like a tween. And I could be wrong. There's not really any evidence that I can remember. But yeah, so it has been a while. And I sort of thought that the Witcher was intending to come and like take the baby away. But it seems like he came and rescued her when she was much older from this whole raid situation. Melanie says she's around 8 to 10. Okay. So yeah, she's a lot older than I expected her to be once he takes her into custody. Because I would have thought if you were raising Witchers that you would be wanting to do that from birth. But apparently not. So, and there's a lot of back and forth about what actually happened at the battle, obviously. Like we've got the kind of argument between the dwarf and the knight about who was on the front lines. And then, of course, there is the wizard who apparently they were also involved in this battle and like stood on this hill off to the side and worked spells. And because of the way that they were all so organized, it seems like the army that was coming at them, like they knew it was coming for a while. They were prepared. This was the Nilfgaard invaders were not, it was not a sneak attack. He says something, the dwarf does, about how they cross the countryside like an iron press rod. Like they just, you know, they were too big and too well trained to go up against in the open field. So it seems as if everybody sort of gathered together in this one place and waited for them as a huge crew to put an end to everything at the same time. So yeah, this is interesting because I don't know anything about Nilfgaard. I don't know what they're like after. You know, there's the suggestion that they are elf blood, but then the actual elf is like, no, they're no more elf blood than any of you human beings because y'all know that you got our blood in your veins somewhere. Which for some reason seems to be really like, I don't know, insulting or shameful. Which I find interesting because in a lot of universes that have like humans and elves, being an elf is considered like really, what's the word I want? It's something that you wish you were. And here it seems like something that people are trying to distance themselves from. So yeah, that's an interesting little tidbit there. And then there's the talk about whether or not Geralt was actually in love with Yennefer, the Enchantress, whom we did meet. He was in the temple with her. And I think it seemed pretty clear in the story that he was into her. It's not totally like... He's a sort of an enigma to me still. But I feel pretty confident in saying that there was something between the two of them for realsies. Like, it was just at the end where she... I feel like one of the stories in the previous book, there's a weird moment that I didn't understand and Rashawn also didn't seem to understand, where he can see her for what she really looks like because Yennefer, the Enchantress, has used magic to make herself beautiful. And he can tell in this instant that she has a hunchback or something, that she's like actually like deformed. And that is why she goes heavy on the magic. And he decides to pretend that he never saw it because he knows that her pride couldn't take it. Realizing that he is aware of what she really looks like is what I think, how I think that went. But yeah, and it's sort of left so that you're not sure if she's dead or not. I got the impression that she was, but I don't really remember how that went, to be honest. So yeah, the way that last story went down is pretty important to how this book begins. And we didn't meet, I don't think, elves or gnomes in the last book. It's easy to assume that they exist because there are all kinds of other creatures that we see running around, including several creatures that I had never even heard of, like Striga. But yeah, here they are all like chilling together. This is not something that's like, they aren't afraid of each other. They are all having conversations like regular people. But it does change things a little bit. It feels very much more Middle Earthy, knowing that this is how things work. And I'm just curious about how that's set up. Like, is it like the Shire where there's whole neighborhoods where other creatures are living and staying? Yeah, like different neighborhoods and communities and whatnot. And you know, the dwarf is complaining about how the fact that they're not all on the same side as each other the way that they used to be, and while they were at war, that is. So what is it like normally? Like, are the dwarves being is there like gentrification happening in the mountains? Like, who's got the upper hand is basically what I want to know. Who is the oppressing power at the moment? Is it human beings? It feels like that's what the elves are saying it is, that it's humans. The dwarves don't exactly seem to feel like they're under a real threat, more just like their pride is being threatened. But the elves seem to feel like they are genuinely being sort of like pushed out of existence. And they're being threatened a little bit more with extinction than they used to be. The gnome, I got no sense off of him at all. So I'm going to say the gnomes are doing just fine, probably. And as for this wizard, I don't know, because the only wizard that we have met in the last book was a real dickhead. Yeah, real creep. So this one seemed to be cooler, but we don't really get to see a lot of him before, you know, just him essentially being like, we all have to learn how to be more cooperative and have peace with each other and see to the heart of the matter. And the dwarf is like, I mean, we do, but you guys definitely picked a side during the war, and you definitely chose a lord to be loyal to. And now that the battle is over, you guys are trying to act like we can all just be friends again, when the lord who was in charge of you is enemies now with the lord who is in charge of us. So how do we set that aside without throwing it in the faces of the people who rule us? We can't be buds with his people when our boss hates him. That's not how things go. And there's a sort of implication in there that the dwarf is sort of like, and if we could, would you even want to? Like, are you able to make that happen? Is that something that, do you want to do the work, basically? Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, the dwarf seems to bring up a lot of pretty valid points. The only human other than like the wizard that speaks, is the knight, who seems to not really be like, he doesn't seem to be on it. You know, he seems to be kind of a dope. He's got a lot of pride, but the way the dwarf like insinuated that he was looking for the supply train and not actually fighting, he responded with like, he didn't yell at him, or he just got red, which makes me think that the dwarf was dead on. And so I'm going to say this guy isn't super good at battle, isn't brave. And yeah, I wish that the human beings had a better representative there. other than Dandelion, who I should mention in the audiobooks is named Dandelion, which is hilarious to me. And yeah, I don't know, like, because this guy who is chasing after, what do you call it? Siri? Is that her name? I keep forgetting, like, but I think it is pronounced, what's her face? Like the Siri from the iPhone? This guy who's chasing after her, I don't really know what he would want with her unless he is, like, going to try and forcibly marry her in order to take over part of the kingdom. But from the way things were talked about, it felt as if the kingdom had been sacked and that it was, like, not an option anymore as far as, like, you know, power. They could, I suppose, be just interested in tracking down a surviving member of the royal family just because you don't want royalty with a claim to the throne out there because that's a loose end. Or, no, I think that might be it. That might be all it is just trying to tie up loose ends and, like, worrying about having her out there. Having her out there is not only, like, you know, a threat to the power seat because of the fact that she has a claim, but there's also the aspect of simply, like, somebody who's got some power, who is teamed up with somebody else who's definitely got power, and that person has a grudge against you and is, like, you know, wanting to probably carry out some pretty sick-ass revenge because you killed their entire family. I feel like those are combined just going to make a headache for you. And if it gets out that she's still alive, will the people of this countryside, like, rally behind her? Because it doesn't feel like anybody is particularly happy with what went on with Nilfgaard. Is that what they're called again? It sounds like vaguely dirty. But and the dwarf who's like, he says Nilfgaard was beaten technically, yeah, but they're not down yet. They're gonna come back. And I wonder what it is that they're after exactly. Like, why are they trying so? Is it just the land and just conquest for the sake of it? I know that's a totally valid thing and that happens, but there's a vibe here that they're after something specific. So, because that's the only real reason to, like, try again and for the dwarf to be, like, so certain that they will try again. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Oh, Melanie says I'm asking all the right questions. All I can say. Nice. Well, good. I'm glad. I always think of Nilfgaardian Leviosa as a lame joke in my head. That's pretty good, actually. That'll probably help me remember it. Do you have any questions for me, Melanie, that you wanted me to ask before I take a little break and then do the second one, the second half? Yeah, I'm like, there is this thing with Dandelion too. Can we just talk about it being pronounced Dandelion in the audiobook? Because I was real tempted to just keep calling him that, but I can't. Dandelion is just too good. But the fact that he's, like, so unwilling to tell anybody whether or not this is true, it makes me crazy because I'm like, you know, people are going to be asking you, and you could sing about anything, but you had to sing about this thing and kind of show off and, like, really, you know, because that's what he does. He's a fucking show off. And I'm delighted to see that he's here because he is such a pain in the ass, but he really brightens up some of the stories in the later half of the book that could easily have been a little too heavy and serious. So, yeah. Although it constantly surprises me when he is with women because I just assume he's gay for some reason. That's how I read him, and I don't know where that comes from. But he's not. He's just, like, kind of foppish and a playboy, which apparently he can afford to do because everybody adores him. Which is what he asked for as a wish, I think, from that genie that was in the first book. So, Also, with the goat in the beginning, I thought of your balls goat impression from last week's book. Oh my God, I forgot about that. I'm not going to do that, but guys, listen to that, because as much as like Rashawn and I weren't in love with the first book because it's the way that it's set up is really strange, and it got a little bit like difficult to follow at times, but there are parts of it that are really great. And I think it's a fun one to listen to. So yeah, if you haven't, go check out that. Again, it's December book club of 2018. All right, Melanie says that I'm in good shape for part 2. Okay, Melanie. Well, I'm going to wrap this one up then and get another cup of tea and take a little break, and then I will come back and finish the rest of the live read for chapter 1. Giggity. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here, and toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.